Hey, Bible nerds, this is Dr. Manny Arango. Welcome to the Bible Department podcast, powered by Arma. We are walking through the entire Bible in a year. You can go to the description or thebibledepartment.com to download a reading plan and join the journey. To all my fellow pastors, I've got a question for you. Does your city know that your church exists? Listen, I get it. You're preaching, you're leading, you're discipling, you're doing ministry. We are in the same boat. And let's be honest, social media and marketing, not your strong suit, not mine either. And that's probably the last thing on your mind. And that's why we chose to partner with Church Candy Marketing for our church plant, The Garden. We out here, y'all. They help churches get more actual guests walking through the doors on Sunday without you or I having to stress over ads or algorithms or trying to crack the social media code. Right now, Church Candy is helping nearly 400 churches reach their communities with simple invite ads, and it works. It's super effective. I can tell you from firsthand experience. So if you're tired of being your city's best kept secret, how about you do this? Go to churchcandy.com/Manny and book a free consultation, book a discovery call. Their team will break it all down and show you how to start seeing new faces at your church this Sunday. I'm in the trenches with you, trying to grow the church. And how about we just start a whole campaign? No more empty churches. So let's partner with Church Candy and get our churches full for the glory of Jesus. Let's go. It is day 83, and we get two of my favorite stories actually here in Genesis chapters 4 through 7. If you've done the reading, I'm proud of you. We are going to have fun today. Roll up your sleeves. Oh, we're going to put your brain in a blender. Let's do it, okay? If you haven't done the reading yet, make sure that you do the reading. What I'm going to say is only going to really resonate if you have done the reading. So Genesis chapter 4 is a story of Cain and Abel. It's actually an extension of the fall. So Genesis chapter 3, we get the fall of man. We get the fall of Adam and Eve. One of the things that I love about the fall is that God appears in he says, "Where are you, Adam?" He doesn't come looking for Eve because she was not left in charge. Humans, men and women, are equal, but we're not the same. We are different. We are unique. And we're living in a world today, at least, that doesn't like to acknowledge that we're different because that would mean that we're inherently unequal. Okay. But we have to unhitch different from equality. It's okay that we are different, and men aren't better than women because we're left in leadership or left in charge. I'm not better than anybody on my team. I don't have more value than anybody on my team. It's just the leaders held responsible by God. And so when things go left, God does not ask to speak to Eve. God's not like, "Eve, where you at?" No, it's Adam. "Where are you? I left you down here. I left you down here to protect. I left you down here to communicate my words, my instructions to Eve. I communicated this to you. It's your job to communicate this to her." And what we have in our culture right now is a lot of men who have fallen into the same sin of Adam, which is to stand by silently while the serpent tempts your wife. And we have a lot of quiet men, silent men who don't speak up. The original sin of man is not to abuse women. Now, that's what our culture would want us to think. But the original sin of man is to stand there, lip sealed, silent, cat's got his tongue, while the serpent tempts. And we know that he was there because as soon as Eve eats of the fruit, she gives some to Adam, who the text says was there with her. God comes down, and he does not come down to curse Adam and Eve. Actually, the only person that gets cursed is the dragon, is the serpent. God comes down not to catch them, not to curse them, but to cover them. So they get garments of skin put on them, and they're given a promise. And it's hard to understand Genesis chapter 4 without this context. So here's our context clue. They're given a promise. Here's what God says. "I'll put enmity between you and the woman." He's talking to the serpent and the woman. "I'm going to put enmity between you two. Moreover, I'm going to put enmity between both of your offsprings." So now all of a sudden we know there's going to be offspring that are going to come from the woman and offspring that's going to come from the serpent. But it's not very clear who this offspring is. Are we talking about baby snakes? Are we talking about demons? Like, what are we talking about? What offspring? And as we're going to find out quick, the Bible doesn't really make things plain. It communicates in images and symbols. And Eastern cultures communicate using images and symbols and chiasms, whereas Western cultures communicate using facts and data. And a number doesn't have a symbolic meaning. A number means what it means, okay? I'm going to put enmity between you and the woman, between your offspring and hers, and he will strike his heel, but he will crush his head, okay? So there's some promise here. And you would imagine if you were given a promise and then you left the garden and got pregnant, you are probably believing that the son you're pregnant with, that your offspring is going to be the one to crush the head of that serpent who tricked you so that you guys could go back to Eden, right? So Eve has 2 children, and she's got a boy named Cain and a boy named Abel. Now, the Bible says that Cain is jealous of Abel. And then Cain, here's a symbol, here's an image, brings Abel out to the field. Now, here's an interesting thing. We need to go back to Genesis chapter 2, verse 19. Because in Genesis 2:19, it says this: out of the ground, the Lord God had formed every beast of the field. Beast of the field, beast of the field. And it says this: the man gave names to all livestock and to all the birds of the heavens and to every beast of the field, beast of the field. So every time we get beasts, we get fields. Okay, Genesis chapter 3, verse 1. Now the serpent was more crafty than any other beast of the field. Okay, we get beasts, we get fields. We get beasts, we get fields. These images are coupled together throughout the first couple of chapters of the Bible. Genesis chapter 3, verse 14. Cursed are you above all livestock and above all beasts of the fields. You see a pattern emerging. Beasts of the field, beasts of the field, beasts of the field. The Bible wants us to weld these images together in our minds, beasts and fields, so that if we see one without the other, we'll naturally conclude that the Bible has left a breadcrumb for us to follow. The Bible loves to establish patterns so that when the Bible breaks the pattern, it'll grab our attention. So Genesis chapter 4, verse 8 tells us that Cain said to his brother Abel, let us go out to the field. So now we get an image, but we don't get the associated or corresponding other half of that image. So who is the beast who's about to be in the field? Well, let me tell you, ladies and gentlemen, Cain is the beast who's going to be in the field. And instead of acting like a human and acting compassionate and empathetic and loving and kind towards his brother, he is going to act like an animal, and he is going to allow the primal instincts of rage and jealousy and anger to take over. To drive this point forward, God warns Cain. He says, sin is crouching. Sin is crouching. That same dragon that devoured your parents, that outsmarted your parents in the garden, that same dragon is here again, and that dragon is crouching. He wants to hunt you like prey. And the moment that that dragon attacks you, you are going to turn into a beast and attack your brother. This is the power of the story, which lets us know that the offspring of the woman is Abel, but the offspring of the serpent is Cain, because it is the enemy's goal to get humans to act like animals. We are going to see this all through Genesis, that the goal of the enemy is to always get humans to act out of their primal instinct, out of their animalistic nature, to not act like humans, but to act like animals. Because Cain now is a offspring of the woman, his blood has a voice, because he is a type and a shadow for the ultimate seed of the woman, who will be Jesus. In the same way that Cain, the beast, has a showdown in the field with who? Cain, the son of the woman, we are ultimately going to have a showdown on the cross between the beast, represented by the Roman Empire and the powers of evil, and Jesus, who is ultimately going to be victorious. And you're going to see this exact competition play out over and over and over and over and over through the biblical story, whether it's Moses and Pharaoh, whether it's Jacob and Esau, whether it's Daniel and Nebuchadnezzar. You're always going to have a beast on one side of the equation and a seed of the woman or a son of man on the other side of the equation. All right, let's get to the flood, and I'll give you a nerdy nugget. A lot of people think of the flood that the story is about God's active wrath, but actually the story is about God's passive wrath. One time my pastor was telling him a story, and he was describing hell, and he said, he's got I think the ages of his kids are like 8, 7, and 6 or something like that. And his kids, the Pastor Robert and Pastor Taylor's kids are all like super, super close in age with each other. And sometimes they say stuff like, we don't want to do our homework. We don't want to clean up. We don't want to do chores. You know what I mean? We want you guys to leave. And Pastor Robert from stage said, imagine if I left. Like, how long would it take before my house became hell for those kids? God forbid they tried to cook. God forbid they started fighting each other. Like, there's no way my kids could survive in an environment that I created for them without me. And so get this, all God has to do, remember, the creation is an account of God going from hovering to residing. And once God rests in the creation, then and only then is it a place for humans to thrive and flourish. So, what if God actually realized that it was so evil that he had to leave? What would happen? Oh, I know exactly what would happen. Creation would unravel and get plunged back into tohu vavohu. And that's exactly what we get in the flood, which is why in Genesis chapter 1, verse 2, there's water in Genesis chapter 1, verse 2. The text is very careful not to implicate God as evil. God doesn't have to send a flood or send rain. All he has to do is remove himself. And when he removes himself, the created order does not have the power in and of itself to sustain said order. It unravels as God leaves and creation is plunged back into chaos. The state of the world, when we get to the flood, is the exact same state of the world in Genesis chapter 1, verse 2. Tohu vavohu. However, God is so kind and so gracious and so loving that he would dare not remove his presence from the earth without first giving a family a way to experience his salvation. So he sets apart one family, Noah and his sons and their wives and Noah's wife. And God allows Noah to restart order once the floodwaters reside. And that's actually what the flood story is about. Now, there's a ton of other nerdy bits and pieces that go into the flood story. There's Nephilim, and I wish I had time to break down like the book of Enoch to you. I don't. Okay. These episodes cannot be full courses. I really, really wish they could be, though. I would argue that actually more than anything in the Old Testament and the New Testament, we have what I'm going to call the passive wrath of God, not the active wrath of God. Now I'm going to give you one more nerdy nugget. We're going to go back to Genesis 6, verse 3. It says this, my spirit will not abide or dwell in humans forever. Their days will be 120 years. Now, if you just read that, Genesis chapter 6, verse 3, like in the NIV, that's not actually how it reads. It reads this way. Then the Lord said, my spirit shall not abide in mortals forever, for they are flesh. Their days shall be 120 years. Now, a lot of people think that this is God limiting lifespans, but that's not true. The reason that we know that that's not true is because there are people who live for a super long time, like after this is said. there are people who live way longer than 120 years, like after this. First of all, Abraham lives to be 175 years old. His son lives to be 180. And then if you take a glance at the genealogy that follows after the flood, there are multiple people on that list who are living way past 400 years of age. So here's what is probably happening. Yahweh is actually communicating to Noah, you've got 120 years to build this ark, okay? That my spirit is not going to abide on the earth forever. Like I'm gonna leave the group chat. Okay. And when I leave the group chat, you're gonna be up a creek without a paddle. Okay. So you need to build a boat. Okay. Now here's an interesting thing about this boat. And you know what? I'll actually give you the interesting things about the boat. I'll probably give it to you tomorrow. Since tomorrow we're gonna be in Genesis chapters 8, 9, and 10. So I'll leave some of this stuff for tomorrow. We'll talk about covenant. And yeah, we'll talk about a lot of this stuff tomorrow. Okay. So we also need to know this. Up until this point, how has God punished people? Adam and Eve have disobeyed God. Did they die? No, they did not. Okay. Cain has disobeyed God. Did Cain die? No. Both Adam and Eve and Cain and everybody that we've encountered up until this point have all not received the active wrath of God, but the passive wrath of God. They've gotten grace. They've gotten the passive wrath of God. So why would it be that all of a sudden God would go from being patient, kind, and passive in his wrath to being active in his wrath? Actually, I would contend that what we're seeing in the flood are the consequences of God simply removing himself. We're also going to see this in like Romans chapter 1, where God doesn't send a spirit of perversion. No, he just simply gives people over. He removes himself, he removes restraint, and he allows people to do and be what they want to do and be. He gives them over. I would actually say that I don't think King Saul, had an evil spirit from God. I actually just think that God's spirit departed, and in the void of God's spirit not being there, it was an evil spirit that took up residence in Saul. Because what happens when God removes himself or removes a hedge of protection or gives us over is that tohu vavohu happens. Chaos happens. That's what happens. When there is no light, there is darkness. And so I would contend, this my whole nerdy nugget, that this is not about the active wrath of God, but the passive wrath of God. Bible Department family, my brand new book, Crushing Chaos, is out, and the trailer is fire. But you don't have to take my word for it. You can watch it for yourself right now. Yeah. What if I told you dragons were real? For the original audience of Genesis, dragons were a common symbol that represented chaos. Dragons were normal in the ancient world, and so were the deities that conquered them. The Babylonian god named Marduk conquered the dragon named Tiamat. The Egyptian sun god named Ra had to conquer a dragon called Apep. And the Canaanite god that many of us know from the Old Testament named Baal had to conquer a 7-headed dragon named Lotan. So when the original audience of Genesis heard about a beast tempting Adam and Eve in the garden, they wouldn't have pictured a slithering snake. Oh no. They would have pictured a ferocious chaos dragon. The original audience would only have one question: who's going to conquer this dragon? Yahweh will not conquer this dragon. Yahweh is not like any of the other gods. He is not like Marduk. He is not like Ra or Baal. He has no rival. He has no equal. The dragon is not his adversary to conquer, but Adam and Eve's adversary to conquer. By partnering with chaos, they became the beasts they were called to conquer. Who will conquer the dragon? Jesus crushed the head of the dragon who tempted Adam and Eve, but the monster in the mirror still lives. And I want to invite you to tame the beast within and to partner with God in subduing doing and ordering the cosmos around you. The only question left is this: how do we crush the chaos that we've become? Let's get into our timeless truth. I remember when I was the football coach for the Hillside High School boys football team, all the boys would tell me about their body counts, how many girls they had slept with. And I would always give them a challenge to be abstinent. I'd say, hey, for the whole season, I want you to be abstinent, whether you're a Christian or not, because abstinence isn't for Christians. It's just for wise people. And they would always tell me, oh, but we're boys, we're men. You don't understand. We're just human. They would appeal to their humanity. And I would always say, who told you that acting like an animal is acting human? How did you confuse animalistic behavior with human behavior? I know who told you that. The beast told you that. The same beast that tricked Adam and Eve, the same beast that got Cain to act like an animal, that beast has gotten you to act like an animal by having sex with tons of different girls, no emotional attachment, no covenant, no real love, just a cold, emotionless, physical activity. He's gotten you to objectify girls and treat them like your prey. You are acting like a predator because at this point, you are a beast. You've become an animal. And the reason that I'm giving you an abstinence challenge is because I want you to reclaim your humanity. Whether you accept Jesus as your Lord and Savior or not, I want to influence you to act more human. Now, of course, I believe that Jesus is the model for humanity. And so it's impossible to act to the fullness of the expression of what it means to be a human without Jesus. But man, let's get you closer than you are right now, because you are acting like a Rottweiler, okay? You are out here acting like a pit bull, just going from one girl to the next. Like, this is just not rational, logical, wise behavior. This is emotional, it's instinctual, it's primal, and animals only make decisions based on how they feel, based on what they need. They're not scheming. No dogs playing chess. They're not building their life 5 steps ahead. They're just doing whatever their flesh demands of them. And that's our timeless truth. Our timeless truth for the day is that God wants you to be human, truly human. Sometimes in church, we try to get people to be angels. And sometimes in the world, we try to get people to act like animals. But humans occupy this unique space in the middle. We're not angels. We're not animals. We are human, made in the image of God. Our flesh is not an evil thing. It is a good thing. And we are not to act like animals. We're not to act like angels. We're to act like humans. That's our timeless truth for the day. All right. I'll be right here tomorrow. We're going to go through Genesis chapters 8 through 10 tomorrow. I'm really, really excited. Actually, I get to talk to you a little bit more about Noah, and then we'll get into some other content. I love you guys. I hope today's content blessed you. If you're on a streak, I'm proud of you. Don't break your streak. If you're not on a streak, let's get on it. Let's get on a streak. I'll see you tomorrow. I love you guys. Thanks so much for joining us on the Bible Department podcast. If this episode was helpful, how about you leave a comment, share with a friend, and subscribe so that you never miss an episode. To learn more about the show, head to thebibledepartment.com. We'll see you right back here tomorrow.